This is Jay Callahan again, another one of our video mini lectures, and this is the first of three that will focus on the issue of actually conducting crisis intervention according to the problem-solving model. I'm going to go through it step by step in these three videos. And remember the background, the themes that we're going to be addressing as we get into it are coping, support, and meaning. Second framework is the symptoms of traumatic stress. But before we get into that, first in this part one of three videos, I just want to talk about the initial phone call and some process issues that would come up even before you begin the first session. So I'm just going to imagine that you're working in the ER, you're working on intake in an agency, and you receive a phone call from someone that sounds like they might be in crisis. Okay, as you would in any situation, you're going to gather some basic information about who the person is and demographics and what's going on, things like that. But then you quickly pick up that there's some urgency behind the person's phone call, and they seem to be in crisis. And so as you listen, and this is really only over the first 5 or 10 minutes, you're to yourself wondering, is this person in crisis? And I would then ask you to recall some of the main aspects of crisis, and that is that the person has experienced a stressful event, that they are now in a state of emotional disequilibrium, emotional upset, that they typically have symptoms of depression and anxiety, and that they're not functioning at their normal level, functional impairment. And as you talk about that with them, at some point you also want to find out if they're having any mental health emergencies. That is there anything immediate that might indicate harm to them or someone else? And so with mental health emergencies, we're talking here, of course, about potential suicide, potential violence toward others, and states of potential defenseless victims. So we're not going to talk about that right now a whole lot, but we'll get much more into this later. But the basic idea is to ask a caller, given all these things that's happening to you and has happened to you, have you had thoughts about killing yourself? Or have you found that you're having thoughts of taking your own life? Okay, now we're going to talk a lot more about this in the future. I just want to kind of plant the idea right now. Or, wow, given all those difficulties you're having, you've had and are having with your neighbor, I wonder if you have thought about getting revenge against him or, hurting him in some way. Or finally, in all of this, are you in any danger? That would be the three possible mental health emergencies. So if the answer to any of these appears to be heading toward yes, then that's a mental health emergency. Remember, it doesn't matter how it turns out. It doesn't matter if the person falling down on the street with chest pain gets to the ER and it's just indigestion. That's not the point. The point is, at this time, is there some evidence that there might be some potential harm that might happen, either through potential suicide, potential violence, or a defenseless victim? And if the answer is yes, then they need to be seen right away, either by you or someone at your agency, or you should tell them to go to the nearest hospital emergency room. If the answer is no, then you would proceed with scheduling crisis intervention, and the timeline here is basically have them come in within 24 hours. Don't let more than one night go by. So in that initial phone call, we want to keep it short. We want to not decrease their anxiety too much. It's potentially a problem to spend too much time on the phone. They might feel better, and then they might feel like, well, I don't need to go in and talk to someone in person. I'm feeling a lot better right now. And of course, in a lot of instances, that's not going to last. And secondly, tell the person what to expect. If they come to your agency, where that is, if you would see them or someone else would see them, what the check-in procedure would be, that sort of thing, so that they know what to expect. It helps people's anxiety to understand what to expect. All right, so then hopefully you then schedule the first visit for this person, and we'll see what happens when they get there. So the other thing I want to mention in this short first video is process issues, and this applies to the first session in particular, but really it applies to all the sessions. So we'll be talking about the content of what you do in the first session of crisis intervention, but process issues are, for example, take charge. Take charge, act like you know what you're doing. If you say, well, I'm a beginner, I've never done this before, I have no clue about what I'm doing, then I say, well, pretend you do. Make it look like you do, and that will help you feel better, and it'll make the client feel better. Okay? Build communication and rapport. That's a consistent need throughout all the sessions. Don't forget to normalize what the person is experiencing, and remember the idea from after a traumatic event. Lots of people have weird thoughts and feelings that are unfamiliar to them, but in almost all cases, those are normal reactions to an abnormal event, and it helps to tell the person that. Don't forget, basic communication skills: empathy, active listening, clarifying, paraphrasing, etc., etc. Maybe this goes without saying, but I guess I'm going to say it. Avoid why questions. Why questions just lead people to kind of go off on tangents, speculating about why they did that or why they felt that way or whatever. It's rarely very helpful. Much better to stick to a description of what they did and a description of what their feelings are. And finally, process emotions. And what I mean by this is continually focus on how a person is feeling. But I want to also point out here that there's a danger if you spend too much time on emotional ventilation. Then sometimes, and this happens more with men in my experience, that a person might feel like, I said too much. I embarrassed myself. I'm going to be ashamed later that I told this person, more than I've told anybody. And sometimes that can lead to a person not coming back for the next appointment because of the shame and embarrassment. So if someone is really spilling their guts a lot, then I might say something like I just said to you, to them. When you go home, you've told me a lot, and I'm wondering if you go home, maybe you'll feel embarrassed that you said too much or something like that. I hope you don't feel that way. That's a normal reaction, and I hope that doesn't interfere with you coming back to our second appointment, which is, as we just said, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, okay, or something like that. And then finally, as a process item, don't forget the client request. And this should be in every clinical situation you're in. What does this person want from me? And especially in crisis intervention, what does this person want from me, right now in this session or in these next few sessions? Okay? So that's the first phone call that you might have, and this is some overall process issues that you would want to pay attention to throughout all the sessions of crisis intervention. All right, so in the next video we'll talk about part 2. It will be part 2, and we'll talk about the actual content of the first session. All right, so I'll see you then.